Hey viewers! Hope you're all doing great. Before I start the story, tell me in the comments which country you're watching from and what time it is there. And if you enjoy my videos, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. The forgotten Crusader queen who fought the Templars. The candles flicker. Their wax runs down the stone walls like slow tears. And beyond those trembling flames, history breathes. Quiet, uncertain, and almost forgotten. Tonight, let us open the door to a chapter buried deep beneath the dust of the Crusades. A tale not of kings, not of knights, but of a queen. A woman whose name the bards stopped singing long before the last Crusader banner fell. Her name was Queen Melisende of Jerusalem. Born in 1105, she was no ordinary woman of her age. Daughter of King Baldwin II, ruler of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, she was not merely born into power, she fought for it. In an age where the sword spoke louder than scripture, she learned to wield both with grace. Her crown was her armor, her silence her sword. To understand her, we must walk back into the 12th century, the time of the Crusades. The Holy Land was not a single kingdom, but a patchwork of fragile fiefs, held together by oaths, greed, and holy fire. The Templars, those warrior monks sworn to protect pilgrims, had risen in strength. They called themselves the Knights of Christ. But beneath their white mantles and red crosses, politics stirred like a viper beneath sand. Jerusalem, the crown of all Christendom, was the jewel every power sought to control. Kings from Europe sent armies. Popes sent blessings. Merchants sent gold. And in the midst of it all stood her, a queen who ruled not with brute force, but with the cunning of survival. When Baldwin II's health waned, he named Melisende as his heir. It was an act almost unthinkable in that time, a woman to rule the holy city. She married Fulk of Anjou, a seasoned French noble, chosen more for politics than love. At first, he sought to dominate her, to claim the throne by his right as husband. But Jerusalem was not a French manor, and Melisende was not a docile bride. Her early years as queen were a battle fought in whispers, councils, and silent defiance. Fulk surrounded himself with his own men, Angevin knights, pushing aside her trusted advisors, men loyal to her father's line. He underestimated her. He thought her fragile. He forgot that she was the daughter of Baldwin II, a king who had fought for every stone in his realm. So, when rebellion brewed among the barons, Melisende turned silence into strategy. She allied herself with the Patriarch of Jerusalem and the native nobility. Rumors say, even some among the Templars who disliked Fulk's growing arrogance, lent her quiet support. Then, in 1134, the rebellion of Hugh II of Jaffa exploded, a conflict that tested her marriage, her throne, and her will. Fulk accused Hugh of treason, of plotting with Melisende herself. Whether it was true or not, the accusation nearly shattered the fragile peace. But fate, as history often writes with irony, turned its quill against Fulk. In 1143, he fell from his horse during a hunting expedition, struck dead. And in that instant, Melisende was free. She ruled as the sole sovereign queen of Jerusalem, one of the very few women in medieval Europe to rule in her own right. And under her reign, Jerusalem bloomed. Cathedrals rose. Monasteries thrived. Art and learning flourished even amid war. She was a builder, a patron, a strategist, a monarch wrapped in grace and intellect. But power as ever draws envy. The Templars, now a formidable military force, began to grow beyond the crown's control. Their fortresses dotted the Holy Land. Their coffers overflowed with European gold. And they answered to no one but their own Grand Master and the Pope in Rome. Melisende saw it, the shift in power, the silent danger beneath holy vows. And for the first time, she found herself opposed by the very knights sworn to defend her kingdom. They were heroes to many, saviors to pilgrims. But to her, they were shadows gathering strength beyond the throne. They defied royal taxes. They refused to obey local law. They held their own lands, armies, and secrets. By the mid-1140s, Whispers of discontent echoed through Jerusalem's corridors. The queen's rule, elegant yet firm, clashed with the Templar pride. Her advisers warned her, "Your Majesty, they grow too strong. One day, even kings may bow to them." And Melisende, ever calm, ever measured, simply replied, "Then let them remember who gave them the right to raise their swords." The tension between crown and cross had begun, and the queen, a woman history tried to forget, would soon stand face to face with one of the most powerful orders the world had ever known. The firelight dances on the walls of the great hall, shadows swaying like memories. Beyond the stone pillars, Jerusalem hums with markets, prayers, and the distant clash of swords. But inside, power is woven in whispers. After the death of King Baldwin II in 1131, Melisende's life changed forever. The crown that had been her father's now settled upon her brow, yet not alone. Fulk of Anjou, her husband, ruled nominally with her, but the balance of power teetered. Fulk arrived in Jerusalem bearing the martial prestige of the West, men-at-arms, foreign gold, and ambition pressed into every step. He saw Jerusalem not just as a city of faith, but as a frontier to command. Melisende, born of Baldwin II and Morphia of Melitene, was as much a daughter of the East as of the West. She carried in her veins the legacy of native Christians and tradesmen, of Armenian stirrings, of Armenian culture mixed with French Crusader blood. In those early years, Fulk attempted to sideline her. He surrounded himself with Angevin knights, newcomers unfamiliar with the customs of Jerusalem. He replaced old nobles loyal to Melisende with his own men. He issued decrees without her name. He excluded her from charters. She, though queen, felt herself slipping into shadow. But Melisende would not be erased. In 1134, the barons of Jerusalem, local lords, native lords, rose in resistance. Among them was Hugh II of Jaffa, her cousin by blood, and a voice for those who believed the kingdom must preserve its eastern roots. The tension between Fulk's westernizing policy and Melisende's rooted connection to the land and its people came to a head. The Templars are part of this tapestry. Founded just a generation earlier, they swore protection to pilgrims, guardianship to holy places, and obedience only to their own rule and the Pope. Some sources say that Fulk was initially supported by the Templars, given his crusading credentials. But as Melisende's influence grew, as she reasserted her authority, the Templars were drawn into court politics. Her opponents accused her of an affair with Hugh of Jaffa, though chroniclers like William of Tyre later suggest that the accusation was more political than factual. It was a device to tarnish her, to weaken her alliances with the local nobles. During these years, Melisende showed an aptitude for statecraft. She was patron of churches, builder of markets, supporter of the native Christian population. Her cultural heritage, French, Armenian, local, allowed her to navigate the complex feudal loyalties of the realm. She maintained her own chancellery, made grants, issued charters, sometimes without Fulk's consent. The Templars, though pledged to the defense of the realm, had their own priorities. Their military order relied on donations from Europe, on independence, on wielding force in frontier zones. Fulk often leaned on them militarily. Melisende sought to ensure that the crown, not the Templars alone, determined policy. The tension was subtle. Who opens a fortress? Who grants a fief? Who stands in council? Who is the queen, not merely by birth, but by power? It was not yet open war, but it was war in the hearts of many. Fulk's death in 1143 removed one opponent. Melisende now reigned jointly with their son Baldwin III, who was still young. She took advantage of this to reinforce her rule, appointing loyal men to key positions, strengthening the hand of the monarchy in relation to the military orders and barons. She oversaw architecture, rebuilding sacred buildings, fashioning Jerusalem not only as fortress, but as beautiful city, streets paved, churches repaired. The Templars remained powerful, but so did Melisende. She respected their role. She granted them privileges, lands. Yet always in the quiet hours before dawn when courtiers whisper in the hallway, She ensured that no one order overshadowed the crown. And so the seeds of conflict with her son, Baldwin III, were planted in these years. Power shared, trust strained, loyalties divided. As he grew, Baldwin watched the Templars, the barons, the church. He learned that rulership was not just inheritance, but assertion. Melisend's dance with the Templars was one of diplomacy, not open sword for now. But the time would come when diplomacy could no longer contain ambition. Jerusalem, 1143. A hush lies over the holy city. Pilgrims murmur their prayers at dawn. The scent of incense floats through the air, and from the Tower of David, the royal banner stirs in a soft wind. King Fulk is dead, thrown from his horse in a hunting accident. The bells toll across the hills of Judea. Melisend, veiled in black silk, stands before the sepulchre. Her eyes are not of a grieving widow, but of a ruler who understands what must be done next. The realm, still fragile, needs steady hands. Her son, Baldwin III, is barely 13. The barons wait, the Templars watch, and Europe listens. She does not tremble. Melisend takes the scepter as regent queen of Jerusalem. Her coronation is quieter than her husband's had been. No thunder of foreign knights, no chance of victory. Only the sound of soft bells, and the murmur of native clergy in Greek, Latin and Syriac. Jerusalem is a mosaic of tongues, faiths, and ambitions. She stands in its center like the golden tessera that binds the pattern. She rules from the Tower of David, the old citadel that watches over the city. Her council is small. Patriarch William of Malines, her loyal chamberlain Manasses of Hierges, and several native lords who had served under her father. The Templars are present, but distant. Their black and white mantles flicker like ghosts among her courtiers. They owe obedience to the Pope, not the Queen. Yet they cannot ignore her, for the roads they patrol, the castles they hold, all lie under her command. Melisend moves carefully. She confirms the Templars' privileges, the right to collect tolls, to hold certain fortresses, but always demands acknowledgement of royal authority. Each charter she signs bears her name alone. Melisendis de Gratia Jerusalem Regina. The seal shows her enthroned, holding the orb and cross. Not a widow, not a mother, sovereign. Outside the palace walls, her rule transforms the city. She patronizes builders and artisans, both European and Eastern. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre is completed under her reign, its marble arches and mosaics shimmering with gold and lapis. She founds monasteries, sponsors the scriptorium of the Holy Sepulchre, where monks and scribes illuminate manuscripts in Latin, Greek, and Armenian. The art of the East meets the style of the West, and from it is born something uniquely Jerusalemite. The sound of a quill scratching gently on parchment. Even the Templars, for all their pride, cannot deny her achievement. Their knights march through streets safer than before. Merchants bring silks from Damascus. Pilgrims walk without fear from Jaffa to the Holy City. Her governance brings order. But harmony in the East rarely lasts. By 1148, new Crusaders arrive. The Second Crusade, led by Louis VII of France and Conrad III of Germany. They come with banners high, faith burning in their hearts, and arrogance clouding their minds. They expect to command, not to learn. The Templars guide them across the land, often ignoring Melisend's counsel. When the Crusaders choose to attack Damascus, against the Queen's better judgment, the expedition ends in disaster. The failure stains Western honor, and the Templars who had guided their route bear blame. In the quiet aftermath, Melisend holds her court. Her tone is calm, but her gaze is steel. Jerusalem, she says softly, cannot be ruled by swords alone. Her son Baldwin, now maturing, watches her carefully. He admires her intelligence, her command, her grace, but behind admiration grows impatience. He longs to rule in his own right. The barons whisper that he is of age, that a man should not be ruled by a woman, no matter her wisdom. The Templars, ever pragmatic, begin to align more closely with the young king. They see in Baldwin a leader who will march, not deliberate. They see in Melisend a ruler who limits their freedom, weighs their actions, asks questions they do not wish to answer. The balance begins to tilt again. Through the next years, Melisend's regency continues with brilliance. She strengthens the royal treasury, reforms tax collection, ensures that roads are rebuilt after the Crusaders' ruinous passage. But under the calm of her administration lies the soft thunder of change. Baldwin wants full kingship. The barons grow restless. The Templars, who once bent knee before the queen, now ride with quiet defiance. At night, in her palace garden, Melisend walks among the olive trees. The city below glows faintly, torchlight and prayers. She knows what is coming. A mother's heart warns her. A queen's mind accepts it. Soon she will have to fight, not with armies of France or Egypt, but with her own son. And the Templars will choose their side. Jerusalem, the year of our Lord 1151. The queen's palace no longer echoes with harmony, but with whispers that gather like dust beneath old stone arches. The courtiers who once bowed with ease now pause before speaking, measuring their words, watching which banner flies from the citadel tower, the lion of Baldwin or the dove of Melisend. Baldwin III has reached his majority. Tall, golden-haired, admired by knights and nobles alike. He carries himself as the heir of kings. But his mother still sits upon the throne. Her seal still marks every decree. Her voice still commands the court. To him, it feels as though the crown he was born to wear still rests upon her brow. The Templars watch with quiet interest. They have grown powerful, too powerful some say, their castles stretching from Gaza to Tortosa. They command armies, manage trade routes, and collect tribute from pilgrims. Their Grand Master in Jerusalem, Bernard de Tremolay, speaks softly but carries the confidence of divine sanction. The Queen, ever cautious, questions their expanding influence. She demands reports of their fortresses, audits of their tolls. To her, every stronghold within her realm must answer to the crown, not to Rome. But the Templars answer to no mortal crown. In her private council, Melisend confides to her loyal chamberlain, Manasses of Hirges. "They build walls within my kingdom," she murmurs, her voice calm yet heavy. "Walls higher than any city gate, and they name them holy." Her concern is not ambition but order. The Templars' independence weakens royal authority. Their secret councils, their wealth, their silence, all erode the balance she has carefully built since her husband's death. Meanwhile, Baldwin begins holding his own court in the northern city of Acre, surrounded by young knights, eager minds, and foreign counselors who tell him that the queen's time is past. They flatter him with talk of conquest, of leading the armies eastward against Damascus or Ascalon. And when he writes to the Templars seeking their allegiance, they respond with respect and subtle allegiance. The queen senses the shift. She does not confront her son directly. Instead, she strengthens her hold upon Jerusalem. Her palace becomes the seat of her loyalists, Greek and Armenian nobles, clerics of the Holy Sepulchre, merchants whose fortunes rise under her protection. She issues charters in her own name, commands fortresses loyal to her cause. The city becomes a mirror divided, half in sunlight, half in shadow. In the summer of 1152, the tension ripens into open challenge. Baldwin rides to Jerusalem, his banner flying ahead of him. His men, among them several Templar knights, enter the city through the northern gate. The people line the streets, uncertain whom to cheer. In the palace, Melisend receives him with serenity. The hall smells of myrrh and old wax. She wears black and gold, her crown simple but firm. "My son," she says softly, "you come with soldiers, not greetings." Baldwin bows, but the gesture is perfunctory. "I come as a king to his capital," he replies, "and find it ruled still as though I were a child." The council chamber grows silent. The Templar envoys stand behind Baldwin, their white mantles gleaming in the candlelight, crosses like wounds upon their chests. The patriarch shifts uneasily. Melisend's eyes, dark and still, hold her son's gaze. "You were a child when you learned to walk these halls," she says, "and you stumble still when you walk in pride. It is not rage that fuels her words, only sorrow and certainty. She knows this moment cannot be undone. That night Jerusalem divides. Half the city swears loyalty to the queen, half to the king. The Templars side with Baldwin. They open their quarters in the Temple Mount to his soldiers, providing arms and shelter. Their chaplains bless his banners. They call his cause righteous, the restoration of divine order. The queen holds the Tower of David. Her loyal men guard the gates and ramparts. Her clerks burn sensitive documents. Her women pray in the chapel. The streets are empty except for the clatter of armor and the low hum of fear. And when dawn breaks, Jerusalem's holy stones tremble under the clash of Crusader steel. For the first time since its capture in 1099, Christian blood stains the streets of the Holy City, not by Muslim hands, but by those of its own rulers. The queen does not flee. She stands upon the battlements, her veil drawn back, her crown glinting in the sun. Her command rings clear across the square. Hold your ground. This city is not his to take. The Battle of Jerusalem has begun, a war not for faith, but for the right to rule faith's most sacred city. The year is 1152, and dawn rises red over Jerusalem, not the glow of sunrise alone, but of fires smoldering from the night before. Smoke curls between the towers and domes. The Tower of David stands grim and resolute, its walls marked with crossbow bolts. Below, the streets are filled with men shouting in Latin, in French, in Arabic. Baldwin's army, knights of the kingdom, mercenaries from the coast, and the white-cloaked Templars, encircle the queen's stronghold. Inside the fortress, Melisende watches from the highest window. Her armor is ceremonial, light mail beneath a black silk gown. Around her neck hangs not a jewel, but a golden cross that had once belonged to her father, King Baldwin II. The chain gleams faintly against the shadow of smoke. Her attendants whisper prayers. Her soldiers, many of them native Christians from Nablus and Bethlehem, look to her for orders. She speaks with calm precision, her voice low but unwavering. No one raises a sword unless the gate is breached. Let the city remember, the queen did not spill the blood of Jerusalem first. Outside the walls, King Baldwin III commands his troops. He is 22 now, tall, proud, burning with certainty. The Templar Grand Master, Bernard de Tremolay, rides beside him. His white mantle flutters, red cross bright as flame. His tone is respectful, but it guides the young king with quiet authority. "My liege," the Grand Master says, "the people must see your justice. Do not burn the tower. Let her yield. A mother must kneel before her son, not perish by his sword." Baldwin nods, though his jaw tightens. His heart aches at the thought of facing her, the woman who had taught him to read, to pray, to lead. Yet pride pushes aside mercy. The realm, he believes, cannot serve two rulers. He orders the siege engines forward. Great wooden towers roll toward the walls. Stones hurl through the air. The city's silence shatters under the sound of war. Inside, Melisende's defenders brace. The Tower of David is ancient. Strong Roman foundations, Crusader battlements above. The queen walks its corridors slowly, speaking to the men by name, reminding them of their duty not to her person, but to the crown of Jerusalem itself. "This kingdom is not built by conquest," she says, "but by the faith we guard. If we break it now, even victory will taste of ashes." The battle rages for hours. Arrows whistle through the air. Stones crash against walls. The banners of the Templars ripple in the dust. Baldwin's men manage to breach the outer courtyard, but the queen's guards hold the inner gate. In one moment of eerie calm, the fighting stops. Both sides pause to tend to the wounded. The bells of the Holy Sepulchre toll faintly across the city, as if to remind all who hear that this is no heathen war, but a quarrel between believers. The queen ascends to the battlements once more. Across the field she can see Baldwin, her son, his armor gleaming, his eyes fixed upon her tower. Between them lies the city both were born to protect. "My son," she whispers into the wind, You have taken counsel from those who serve their order, not their king. She means the Templars, their influence, their pride, their growing empire within the Holy Land. That night, under a sky streaked with firelight, a messenger crosses the lines under truce. It is Patriarch Fulcher, an old priest who had served since her father's reign. He carries words of peace from Baldwin. "Your Majesty," he says gently, bowing before her, "the king offers reconciliation. Yield Jerusalem to his rule. Retire to Nablus, with full honors and your dower lands. No harm shall come to your household." Melisende listens in silence. Around her, her captains wait. She closes her eyes. When she speaks, her voice is steady, neither proud nor broken. "Tell my son," she says, "that I will not yield to the Templars who whisper behind his crown. But I will not see Jerusalem bleed. If he comes without sword, I will open the gate." The next morning the siege ends. Baldwin enters the city not as conqueror, but as king reclaiming his capital. The Templars march beside him in disciplined ranks, their armor reflecting the sunrise. When he reaches the Tower of David, Melisende stands at the entrance, unarmed, regal, unbowed. The two stare at each other in silence. Finally the queen kneels, not as submission but as closure. Baldwin lifts her by the hands and kisses her forehead. "The kingdom is won again," he says softly. "The war is over, but the wound remains." The Templars gain new privileges, and their power deepens in the years that follow. The queen withdraws to Nablus, ruling her estates quietly. Her influence diminished, but her legacy enduring. In her exile, she builds churches, sponsors scriptoria, and continues to correspond with abbots and bishops from across Christendom. Her letters reveal no bitterness, only sorrow at how ambition had replaced devotion in the hearts of men sworn to the cross. The queen had fought the Templars not for herself, but for Jerusalem's soul. And though the city still stood, something invisible had cracked, a line running through its stones, faint but eternal. The battle for Jerusalem had ended, but the silence that followed was heavier than the clash of steel. The queen, once sovereign of the holiest city in Christendom, now rode northward, away from the walls she had built, the throne she had guarded. It was not defeat that weighed on her shoulders. It was memory. Her retinue was small, a handful of loyal attendants, scribes and guards. They rode through the valleys of Samaria, past olive groves and vineyards planted by her ancestors. Ahead lay Nablus, her dower estate, nestled in the shade of Mount Gerizim. Once a Canaanite city, now a quiet refuge, it waited like an old friend welcoming her home. When she arrived, the townspeople gathered at the gates, uncertain whether to cheer or mourn. She dismounted, her veil drawn, her voice soft but firm. "I come not as queen, but as servant to the peace of this land." And from that moment, Melisende ruled again, not from a golden throne, but from the heart of her people. Nablus became her sanctuary. The palace was modest compared to Jerusalem's citadel. Stone halls, narrow windows, courtyards blooming with jasmine. In the evenings, she would sit beneath the fig trees, reading from illuminated psalters written by her own scribes. Her court was small but learned. She gathered theologians, calligraphers, and poets from across the Crusader states, Syrians, Armenians, Greeks, and Latins. She commissioned copies of holy texts in multiple tongues, preserving the blended heritage of Jerusalem's faith. The scriptorium of Nablus, as it came to be called, became a beacon of scholarship long after her death. Even from exile, Melisende's influence rippled through the kingdom. Merchants still sought her patronage, abbots her counsel. Letters from Antioch and Tripoli arrived weekly, asking her judgment on disputes or treaties. Even her son, Baldwin III, now ruling Jerusalem, continued to seek her advice in matters of law and faith. Their relationship, though strained, softened over time. When Baldwin faced the growing threat of Nur ad-Din, the Muslim ruler of Aleppo, he turned to his mother for counsel. In a rare reunion, he visited Nablus. He entered her chamber quietly. She was older now, her hair streaked with silver, her hands thin but steady as she wrote upon parchment. When she looked up, there was no resentment in her gaze, only calm recognition. "You have your kingdom," she said softly. "May you learn that it is not the sword that holds it, but the word." Baldwin knelt, not as king before queen, but as son before mother. Their reconciliation was quiet, private, but it restored something lost between crown and kin. In her final years, Melisend's thoughts turned inward, not toward politics but toward faith and art. She commissioned the famous Melisend Psalter, a masterpiece of 12th century illumination. Gold and azure pages, painted with scenes from both Western and Eastern traditions, carried the subtle message she had lived by all her life: unity through faith, not conquest. Each page was a whisper of harmony between cultures, each line of gold a prayer for peace between swords. The Templars, now at the height of their power, still held their fortresses, their vows of secrecy, their arrogance of purity. Yet even they could not erase her influence. Many of their own scribes used her psalter as inspiration for sacred manuscripts. Without her quiet patronage, the art of Crusader Jerusalem might never have survived the wars that followed. When illness came, she did not resist it. She walked her gardens each evening, leaning on her staff, the scent of myrtle and sage filling the air. Her attendants wrote that she spoke often of her father, her sons, and of the city she had loved more than herself. "Jerusalem," she whispered once, "was never meant to belong to any one people. It was meant to be shared like light." The wind carried her words beyond the walls, across the valleys, over the hills, down to the roads once guarded by the Templars she had defied. And so the queen who had once stood against armies now ruled only the stillness of her garden. Yet in that silence, her legacy endured, not as a conqueror's triumph, but as a woman's quiet defiance in a world built by men and sanctified by blood. The final days of Queen Melisend were veiled in calm. Her body had grown frail, but her mind remained sharp, sharper than the blades that had once defended her throne. She no longer spoke of kings or crusades. Instead, she asked to hear psalms sung in the old tongues, Latin, Greek, and Arabic. In her chamber, the air was filled with quiet reverence. The light of a single candle flickered over the gilded pages of her psalter. Her scribe sat by the bedside, recording her final words. Not commands, not regrets, but reflections. "They call it holy war," she murmured, "but holiness cannot live where hatred dwells." The Templars fought for faith, yet forgot mercy. Her attendants wept softly. Outside, the hills of Nablus were bathed in golden light, the same light she had seen as a young queen riding into Jerusalem, full of fire and purpose. Now that same sun fell upon her face, and for a moment it seemed to bless her one last time. That night she requested no priest, no relic, no crown, only her psalter. She held it to her chest, whispering prayers between breaths until silence claimed her. The funeral of Melisend was unlike any before or after. Christians, Jews, and Muslims all came to pay respects. The streets of Nablus filled with weavers, farmers, monks, and soldiers. No trumpet sounded, no banners waved. Instead, the mourners carried lamps of oil, their light forming a river of gold flowing through the night. Her son, King Baldwin III, rode at the head of the procession. He did not wear his crown. He walked barefoot beside her bier, his head bowed, the sound of sandals on stone echoing softly under the chants of psalms. She was buried in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, beside her ancestors, the queens and kings of Jerusalem. Yet unlike them, her tomb bore no grand inscription. Only a small carving read, "Melisend, Queen of Jerusalem, Builder of Peace." Years turned to decades. The Templars grew more powerful, their secret influence spreading from Jerusalem to Paris and Rome. Chroniclers wrote of kings and knights, of crusades and conquests, but the name Melisend faded into the margins of history. Her psalter was lost for a time, stolen, sold, hidden, until a monk in the 14th century found it buried within the vaults of a Cypriot monastery. Its pages, still luminous, told her story better than any chronicle could. The brushstrokes carried whispers of her reign, a woman's voice preserved in gold leaf and ink. Her legacy did not vanish. Transformed. In the convents of Jerusalem, nuns copied her psalter by candlelight. In Paris, Templar scribes studied its art, unaware it was born from the hand of the queen they once defied. And in secret chronicles, scholars of the East still spoke her name. Malasanat al-Muqaddasa, the Holy Queen of the Crossroads. She was never canonized. No miracles were claimed in her name. And yet, her greatest miracle endures, that a woman in a century of swords ruled not through fear but through wisdom. Power, she once wrote, is not given by God to destroy, but to protect what is beautiful. And perhaps in some forgotten crypt beneath Jerusalem, her spirit still lingers, among candles and dust, beside the relics of those who once doubted her, whispering to every woman who ever dared to lead, "Be still, and build." The year was 1161, and the great Queen Melisende of Jerusalem was gone. Her tomb lay in the Abbey of St. Mary in the valley of Jehoshaphat, shaded by olive trees and watched by the monks who whispered prayers in Latin, their voices low and haunting. But the silence that followed her death was not peace. The Templars, those knights of white mantles and red crosses, spoke her name only in hushed tones. Some said she had died with forgiveness on her lips. Others, that her spirit had not forgiven at all. Because beneath the stones of Jerusalem, the struggle she began, between the throne, the clergy, and the Templar order, had not ended. It only sank deeper, hidden beneath the politics of kings and the prayers of priests. It is said that on certain nights, the brothers of the Temple Mount heard the sound of footsteps in their halls. Not the steps of armored men, but of softer tread, measured, regal, like a queen walking where no queen should be. The legend whispered that Melisende still roamed the vaults of the old palace, that she searched for something she had never found in life, the truth about the Templars' secret gold, and the betrayal that had divided her family. In the dim corridors of the old Crusader kingdom, stories turned to superstition. Templar knights, on watch at the Al-Aqsa compound, spoke of candlelight flickering without wind, of a woman's voice murmuring psalms in the dead of night, the voice of a queen who had loved Jerusalem too much to leave it. But beyond the ghost stories there was history. After her death, the Templars gained enormous influence. Their wealth, their secrecy, their alliances with merchants and kings, all rose during the years after Melisende's reign. They built fortresses across the Holy Land, Chastel Blanc, Safed, Tortosa, and the mighty temple fortress itself, overlooking the Dome of the Rock. And as their power grew, so did the stories of their arrogance, their clashes with kings, their secret councils, and their growing independence. The order that had once bowed to queens and kings now bowed only to the Pope. Melisende's dream of a balanced Jerusalem, a city ruled by both sword and scripture, began to fade. Still, her name lingered like incense. In the manuscripts of the Abbey of Bethany, monks copied her story into Latin and French, calling her Regina Sapientissima, the wise queen. Her reign, they wrote, had been a golden age in the land of sorrow. Under her, arts and learning flourished. She had rebuilt churches destroyed by war. She had brought Greek, Latin, and Armenian scholars together, and even welcomed Muslim poets into her court. But those who came after her, her son Baldwin, her rivals, her enemies, reduced her to a shadow in history books, a footnote in the chronicles of the Crusades. Centuries later, travelers who came to the Holy Land searched for her traces. An English pilgrim in the 14th century wrote, "The Queen Melisende, once mighty in Jerusalem, is now forgotten by all but the stones that bear her name." He described ruins where vines grew through Crusader arches, and fragments of mosaics glimmered faintly in the dust. He found, carved faintly in stone, the Latin letters Melisende Regina, barely visible, worn smooth by centuries of hands and wind. He pressed his fingers to the letters and wrote in his journal. It felt as though she still watched, unseen. But there was another kind of memory, not written but whispered. Among the descendants of the Eastern Christians of Jerusalem, stories passed from grandmother to granddaughter. They said that the queen had once fed the hungry herself, walking through the alleys of the old city dressed in plain cloth, her golden crown hidden beneath a veil. They said she spoke to the poor in Arabic and Syriac, calling them her people, and that the Templars, proud, armored and foreign, had mocked her mercy. That was why she turned against them, not for politics, but for compassion, for love of a city and its people, not its conquerors. The echoes of that love still linger in the stones of Jerusalem, in the faint mosaic patterns hidden beneath the floors of ancient churches, in the quiet wells where water still flows from the age of the Crusaders, and in the shadowed stairways that lead beneath the Mount of Olives. If you close your eyes, you can almost see her. The faint glint of silver armor under a silk robe, a golden cross at her throat, and eyes that have seen both victory and ruin. The queen who ruled a kingdom of faith and fire, and whose heart, perhaps, still beats beneath the dust of her city. After Queen Melisend's death, the world of Jerusalem did not stop, but it changed. The crown passed to her son Baldwin IV, then to her grandsons, and finally, the city itself slipped from Christian hands. By the year 1187, Jerusalem fell to Salah ad-Din, known to the west as Saladin, the Kurdish general who united the Muslim lands and swept through the Crusader states like a storm. The Templars fought to the very end. They defended the walls of the city, the Tower of David, and the sacred precincts they once guarded for her. But the queen they had defied was long gone. And yet, in their defeat, some said they felt her judgment. When the banners of the cross were torn down from the ramparts, a few knights whispered, "The queen's curse has found us." In the years that followed, stories spread across Europe about what had happened in Jerusalem. Chroniclers wrote of Templar bravery, but also of their pride, their hidden wealth, their secret rites. And in the whispers of pilgrims, Melisend's name began to return, not as a queen, but as a symbol of what Jerusalem had once been and what it had lost. Old monks at St. Lazarus Hospice said her tomb wept in the nights after Saladin's victory. Drops of moisture appeared on the marble lid, glistening in the candlelight like tears. Pilgrims would kneel and touch the stone, praying not only for Jerusalem, but for the soul of the woman who had once ruled it with both iron and grace. The Templars, meanwhile, retreated to their fortresses along the coast, at Acre, Tyre, and beyond. There, their order became something darker. They grew secretive, suspicious, hardened by loss. Gone was the age of Crusader queens and courtly chivalry. The new age was one of mercenaries, merchants, and politics. Yet, among the older knights, some remembered Melisend. They called her the Queen of the Light, because she had walked among them in an age when faith still meant something pure. They spoke of her before battle, invoking her name not as an enemy, but as a lost guide. One Templar commander wrote in his diary in 1191, during the siege of Acre, "If Queen Melisend had lived, we might not have lost Jerusalem. Her hands held both sword and scripture. We have only steel." Centuries would pass before her story would be written again. For 300 years, her tomb lay silent. The Abbey of St. Mary fell into ruin. Its walls cracked, its roof caved in. But beneath the earth, her sarcophagus endured. In the 19th century, when European explorers returned to the Holy Land, they found fragments, inscriptions, carvings, and bones, and they began to piece together her story once more. They uncovered a world almost forgotten. The painted manuscripts she commissioned, filled with golden illuminations. The palaces she built, whose columns had been turned to rubble. And the small stone cross she wore, still glimmering faintly after 7 centuries. By candlelight, historians tried to understand her reign, and why she had fought the Templars. What they found was not hatred, but fear. Melisend had seen the future before anyone else. She had understood that the Templars' rise, their loyalty only to the Pope, their endless wealth, their growing armies, would one day overshadow the very kings and queens they swore to serve. She was right. By the 1300s, the Templars were destroyed, arrested by the French crown, accused of heresy, burned at the stake. Their vast empire of gold vanished overnight. And in those moments when the flames rose over Paris, one chronicler wrote, They met their fate as they had made it. The Queen of Jerusalem was avenged. But vengeance was not what she had wanted. Melisend's heart, as it is remembered, had always been for her city, for the bells of the Holy Sepulchre at dawn, for the murmur of prayers in many tongues, for the fragile peace between faiths that flickered for a while, like a candle in a storm. The wars had taken all that from her, and from Jerusalem itself. And so, in the soft rhythm of history, she faded again. Her name buried under the weight of men's chronicles. Her deeds overshadowed by the swords of kings. Her voice lost in the dust of ruins. Yet the stones of Jerusalem remember. If you stand near the Kidron Valley and listen to the wind whisper through the olive trees, it still carries her echo. A woman's voice, calm, commanding, sorrowful, says, "I built this city with love, and you burned it with pride." Even now, archaeologists and historians still uncover traces of her reign, bits of frescoes, coins, and relics bearing her seal. A crowned dove holding an olive branch. Perhaps in that symbol she left her truest message. That peace is not born from conquest, but from courage, the kind she carried to the very end. Centuries passed. Empires rose and fell. Jerusalem changed hands again and again, from Crusaders to Ayyubids to Mamluks to Ottomans. Yet somehow, quietly, Queen Melisend's name did not die. It traveled like a ghost through time, through parchments, through psalms, through whispers in monasteries where no woman's voice should have been remembered. By the 13th century, her memory had taken on a strange, luminous form. Among certain monks in France and Italy, she was no longer called Melisend, Queen of Jerusalem, but the Lady of the Light. They said she had foreseen the downfall of the Templars. They said she had warned them, that their pride, their hunger for gold, and their secret counsels would lead to ruin. And when her warning was ignored, her soul turned watcher, not vengeful, but patient, waiting for history to reveal its truth. In the monasteries of Burgundy, scribes copying old Crusader chronicles added quiet notes in the margins. Melisenda Regina, the queen who foresaw the temple's fall. In the painted panels of Avignon, a pale woman in a crown appeared beside depictions of Jerusalem. Her hand rested not upon a sword, but upon a candle, burning softly in the dark. The inscription beneath her read, Lux non occidit. The light does not die. And so, from the ashes of her forgotten reign, a legend began. Through the 14th and 15th centuries, bards and poets spoke of her in different guises. To the Christians of France, she was the Queen of the East, a symbol of wisdom and faith. To mystics in Germany, she became a figure of divine prophecy, the woman who saw the pride of men destroy their holy order. And in Italy, her image appeared in manuscripts of alchemy and secret brotherhoods, where she was known as Melisenda Lux Vera. Melisend, the true light. No one could quite explain how her story had survived when so many others were lost. But perhaps that is what happens when history tries to forget a woman who held power. The truth hides itself in art, in song, in myth, and waits to be rediscovered. The Templars too left echoes. Though their order was destroyed in 1312, their memory lived on in secret fraternities, in stories of hidden treasure, and in symbols carved on stone chapels across Europe. In some of these carvings, especially in rural France, a crowned woman appears beside the Templar cross, holding a scroll or a key. Her face is serene, her expression solemn. Historians argue about who she was meant to represent. But in the soft folds of her robe and the downward cast of her eyes, some say they see Melisend, the queen who once opposed them, now carved beside them for eternity. Was it irony or repentance? No one knows. In later centuries, when the Renaissance rediscovered the past, scholars began to write of her again, this time as a pioneer, a woman who ruled in her own right when Europe still denied women the throne. A ruler who combined the diplomacy of Eleanor of Aquitaine with the intellect of the Byzantines. A patron of art, architecture, and sacred learning, who brought a touch of Constantinople's splendor to Jerusalem. One chronicler of the 16th century wrote, "She was the first and last to bring the gentleness of wisdom into a city of swords." Even as her image softened into legend, the shadow of the Templars lingered. By then, their myths had become stories of secret knowledge, of hidden relics, of forbidden faith. And always, somewhere in those tales, the figure of a woman appeared. Sometimes as a saint, sometimes as a sorceress, sometimes as a guardian. In the catacombs of Rome, a faded fresco shows a veiled woman with a golden halo, standing before a cross with equal arms. In one hand she holds a book, in the other a small lamp. Underneath, written faintly, Melisenda lux mea estate. Melisende, my light. Some historians believe these symbols are nothing more than artistic invention, coincidence shaped by devotion. But to those who listen closely, to those who walk through the echoing cloisters and read the faded script of forgotten monks, it feels different. It feels as though the queen herself shaped her own myth, reaching across centuries to remind the world that she once ruled not just by power, but by light. And so, in the quiet moments of history, in the flicker of a candle, in the scent of dust and ink, in the ringing of distant church bells, her presence endures. When travelers came to Jerusalem again in the 19th century, they still asked about her. Guides would nod toward the ancient churches, the buried abbeys, the stones that bore no name, and say softly, "She is still here." For in this city, even memory does not die. It only hides beneath the layers of time. And beneath those layers, the forgotten Crusader queen still waits. Her story written in light and silence. In the space between faith and history, the wind over Jerusalem's old city carries more than dust. It carries echoes, faint as breath, soft as the rustle of linen veils in the ancient courtyards where queens once walked. And if you listen closely, under the hum of the markets and the distant call to prayer, you might still hear her name, Melisende, the queen who defied the Templars, the queen who ruled when women were meant to bow, the queen whose shadow lingers between faith and stone. By the dawn of the 20th century, long after her story had faded into half-myth, archaeologists began to uncover what history had buried. They found beneath the Mount of Olives, near the church of the Tomb of the Virgin, remnants of a Crusader-era abbey. Its walls were broken, its mosaics shattered, but among the rubble lay fragments of carved marble, crosses entwined with vines, the faint outline of a dove, and a single letter carved deep. M. Was it hers? They could not be sure. But the scholars who brushed the dust from the stone said it felt like finding a heartbeat after centuries of silence. In the archives of Paris and London, yellowed manuscripts told more of her story. Deeds, letters, charters, and prayers written in her own hand. She had ruled beside her husband, King Fulk of Anjou, and after his death, she had ruled alone. She had built fortresses, churches, and a library filled with Byzantine scrolls. She had minted coins bearing her name, Melisende Regina, the first woman ever to do so in the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Every detail uncovered was a whisper from the past, a reminder that she had not been merely a queen of piety, but of intellect, will, and vision. And slowly, modern historians began to realize what medieval chroniclers had concealed. That Melisende had fought not for power alone, but for equality, a concept alien to her century. In dim museum halls, curators arranged her artifacts beneath glass. A fragment of embroidered silk, a small jeweled cross, a seal impression with a crowned dove, the same emblem that had become her symbol in legend. Visitors would lean close, reading the placards, often whispering her name under their breath. And in that quiet moment, under the hum of the museum lights, something timeless stirred. The same quiet defiance that once echoed in the vaulted halls of Jerusalem's palace. Meanwhile, the story of the Templars grew darker. Books, secret societies, and speculative historians turned their legacy into myth. The Holy Grail, lost relics, forbidden secrets, and hidden treasure beneath the Temple Mount. But amid all those tales of men and mystery, Melisende's voice was the soft counterpoint, the human reminder that the Crusades were not only a saga of war, but of faith, loss, and the yearning for peace. She had stood in that same city, between cross and crescent, between east and west, and tried, for one fragile moment, to hold them together. As the decades rolled on, her name appeared again in books and studies, no longer in the footnotes. She became a symbol, not of vengeance, but of vision. Feminist historians in the late 20th century called her the first queen regnant of the Latin East, a woman who defied papal authority, outwitted her husband, and faced down one of the most powerful military orders in Christendom. They wrote that she had fought the Templars not with armies, but with law and diplomacy, that she had used her knowledge of languages and trade to weave alliances that even steel could not break. And when she lost not in disgrace, but in silence with dignity. The silence of someone who knows history will not remember her kindly, but believes, somewhere in the far future, truth will find its way back to her. And so it did. Archaeologists continued to dig. Writers continued to dream. And filmmakers, artists, and poets began to rediscover the queen who had once ruled a city of miracles. In modern retellings, she became a figure of haunting grace. A woman of faith surrounded by greed. A ruler trapped in a world of swords. A voice of light struggling against the stone walls of history. Her conflict with the Templars, once reduced to a political feud, became a symbol of something much larger. The eternal struggle between conscience and control, between those who seek to build and those who seek to dominate. Even today, under the gold of Jerusalem's dome and the shadow of the Temple Mount, her story still breathes. Tour guides rarely mention her, but her traces are everywhere. In the old Crusader stones reused in mosques, in the fragments of mosaics under centuries of dust, in the half-forgotten grave said to hold a queen who never left her city. At night, when the city quiets, and the lights fade along the walls, the olive trees whisper again in the wind. If you close your eyes, you can almost see her, a solitary figure in a silk cloak, walking the corridors of her lost palace, her hand brushing the walls that once echoed her name. The night air of Jerusalem carries a scent both sweet and sorrowful, olive oil, stone dust, the faint perfume of history that never fades. The city hums with traffic and prayer, with new languages echoing over ancient steps. And yet, in certain corners, near the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, or the broken gates of the Citadel of David, time still bends. It is there that the forgotten Crusader queen, Melisende, seems closest. Tourists walk past her ruins every day. The faint outline of her abbey, the cracked cisterns she built to hold rainwater, the faded mosaics once made for her chapel. Few stop to look. Fewer still know her name. But sometimes, when the sunlight hits the stone at a certain hour, it's as if the past exhales. Shimmer. A whisper. A shadow that moves like a memory. It began with a young historian named Dr. Layla Carver. She came to Jerusalem not seeking treasure, but a voice. The voice of the woman the Templars tried to erase. Her research began in a dusty archive in London, among parchments forgotten by time. There she found a letter, brittle, sealed with wax faded to brown. It was addressed to the Lady of the Holy City, Melisende Regina. Inside, a single line written in Latin. They may claim the sword, but the crown belongs to you. The letter was unsigned, but the handwriting matched one known scribe from the Order of the Temple. Could it be that even among her enemies she had allies? Layla's hands trembled as she read. For centuries, Melisende had been painted as a pious queen, or a schemer. But this letter suggested something deeper. A hidden alliance, a secret respect between rivals. Layla followed the clues east, to Jerusalem. She walked the same narrow lanes the queen once had, under arches carved by Crusader masons, past old convents, into silence broken only by the call of doves. Her steps led her to the convent of Saint Anne, where nuns kept relics of the Latin kingdom, chalices, fragments of murals, fragments of memory. One old nun, eyes clouded but sharp with wisdom, took Layla's hand and said softly, "She is not gone, child. Some women live in the stones." And then she showed Layla a small, hidden chamber under the chapel, a place tourists never see. Inside, carved faintly on the wall, were two symbols, a cross within a circle and a crowned dove. The emblem of Melisande. Layla touched it with trembling fingers. Felt cold but alive. As if the centuries between them had dissolved for a breath. That night, back in her rented room overlooking the old city, Layla wrote in her journal, "History does not forget. It simply waits to be heard again." Her words carried through the flicker of candlelight, as outside, the wind swept over the ancient rooftops, curling through narrow streets where the Queen once rode at dawn. And far below, near the Mount of Olives, a cat darted between the stones. The same path that once led to Melisande's final resting place. In the weeks that followed, Layla's findings began to spread. Scholars dismissed her at first. A romantic interpretation, they said. A feminist fantasy. But when her photographs of the crowned dove carving reached the academic journals, tone changed. More discoveries followed. Fragments of correspondence, hidden beneath centuries of soot and salt. Records of how Melisande mediated peace between warring orders. Letters written in Greek and Arabic, showing her role as a bridge between empires. The Crusader queen who once fought the Templars had not done so for pride, but for peace. And in that revelation, Layla found the heartbeat of her story. One evening, under the golden sky of Jerusalem's sunset, Layla stood before the ruins of Melisande's abbey at Bethany. Olive branches swayed in the wind, casting dappled light on the stones. She closed her eyes, and in the hush of dusk, she heard a whisper. Faint, almost impossible. The echo of a woman's voice, calm and resolute. "Tell them I was not forgotten. Tell them I remained." Layla smiled through tears. And in that instant she knew. Melisande had not vanished into legend. She had simply been waiting for another woman to find her voice again. That night, Layla's paper began with a new title. Melisande of Jerusalem, the queen who fought the Templars and built peace from war. It would go on to be read across the world, inspiring documentaries, novels, and films. And for the first time in 800 years, the queen's name returned to the lips of the living. And so, in the flicker of screens, in the quiet of libraries, in the glow of museum halls, she lives again. Her crown, long turned to dust, shines brighter than ever. Not made of gold, but of remembrance. The forgotten Crusader queen is forgotten no longer. The moon rises over Jerusalem. Its light spills across the rooftops, brushing the domes with silver, touching the spires like soft fingertips. The city seems asleep, and yet it listens. Every stone here has heard prayers, tears, and footsteps from ages past. The walls breathe, quietly, patiently, holding the memory of 1,000 souls. And somewhere within that quiet breath, lingers the name Melisande. It is said that on still nights, when the wind sweeps from the Judean hills, a soft chiming can be heard near the ruins of the abbey at Bethany. Not bells, not metal, something else. A sound like the gentle rustle of silk, the turning of a page, the whisper of a crown being set down upon cool marble. Old monks once said it was the queen's spirit, walking the cloister she built. Her voice carried in the breeze that moves through olive branches. She does not haunt in sorrow, they said, but in watchfulness, as if she still guards the city she once ruled. Centuries have passed since her name was carved on parchment. The Crusader banners are long gone. The Templar fortresses stand as hollow shells, their stones taken, their glory buried. But Melisande's presence endures in subtler ways. In a Byzantine-style painting in a small Greek church, her likeness appears, unlabeled, faint, yet unmistakably hers. A woman crowned, holding not a sword but a dove. In a fragment of Arabic poetry from the 12th century, found in Damascus, a line reads, "She ruled with light, and her eyes held no empire, only mercy." And in the Chronicles of William of Tyre, though brief and tangled with politics, he admits what her rivals never could. She was wise beyond the measure of kings. Dr. Layla Carver's research, decades later, began to piece together what history had lost. through translations and archaeology, through faint traces of pigment in shattered frescoes, a clearer image emerged. A woman not defined by war, but by survival. Layla's documentary, The Queen Who Fought the Templars, aired years later to quiet acclaim. The narration opened with the sound of wind and church bells. Then Layla's voice, low and reverent. This is not the story of saints or soldiers. It is the story of a woman who stood between them, and refused to kneel. The final scene showed the Jerusalem sunrise over the hills. A slow, golden unfurling of light over stone. The camera gliding over the same path Melisande once walked. A voice whispered beneath the score. The city remembers. Today, a small museum display in the old city bears her name. Visitors pause before her portrait. A modern reconstruction from coins, paintings, and chronicles. A plaque reads, Melisande of Jerusalem, 1105 to 1161. First Queen Regnant of Jerusalem, patron of the arts, builder of churches, peacemaker among knights. Her rule endured storms, her legacy endured silence. Children pass by without knowing her weight in history, but the guides tell her story gently, a tale of courage, grace, and defiance. And so, her legend has shifted again. Not of blood, not of battles, but of endurance. Melisande became a bridge between the Crusaders and the Eastern Christians, between the Templars' fury and the Church's order, between the past's fire and the present's quiet. Her greatest victory was not in war, but in remembrance. Even now, as night deepens, the old stones gleam faintly in the moonlight. Some say, if you walk alone through the Armenian quarter, you might feel the faint brush of silk against your arm, or catch the scent of rose oil. The Queen's perfume lasts only a second, but it's enough to make you pause, to turn, to wonder if the past just passed by. And perhaps that is how she remains, not as a ghost, but as a whisper, a memory breathed into every pilgrim's sigh, every candle's flame, every echo of the holy city at night. She was the queen who fought the Templars, but her true conquest was time itself. Softly now, listen, the bells in the distance, the wind through the trees, the steady heartbeat of a city that refuses to die. That is her kingdom still. The candles flicker low now. Their soft golden light dances across old pages, across memories, across the name that time once tried to erase. Melisande. She is no longer just a figure in a chronicle, or a name pressed into wax seals. She is a voice, faint but certain, woven through the breath of Jerusalem itself. You can still trace her story, in the stones beneath your feet, in the worn carvings along forgotten chapels, in the faint scent of dust and incense that lingers in the corridors of the old city. When you stand upon Mount Zion at dawn, and look toward the east, you see the same golden light that once fell upon her face. You hear the same whispers of the wind that swept through her palace gardens. And if you close your eyes just for a moment, you might even feel her presence beside you. Queen, not remembered for her armies, but for her stillness, for her quiet strength in a world of noise. Take a slow breath in, and imagine it. The faint echo of hoofbeats fading into the valleys. The hymns drifting from the churches she built. The laughter of women reading in her library when no one believed they should. Exhale softly. That is her gift. The calm beneath the chaos. The peace beneath the stone. Now listen. Far away a bell tolls. Once, it would have marked the hour of prayer. But tonight it is something else. A heartbeat from the past. Each chime carries the rhythm of her legacy. Courage. Wisdom. Grace. Breathe again. Feel the weight of centuries ease upon your shoulders. Let the story settle like dust upon an ancient altar. Quiet, warm, familiar. Melisande's time has long ended. But history never truly ends. It hums beneath the ground, beneath the olive trees, beneath the sleeping stones of Jerusalem. And as long as someone remembers, as long as one voice still speaks her name softly into the air, Her story continues. So now, close your eyes. Let the images fade. The towers, the silk banners, the storm of the Crusades. Let them dissolve into stillness. Soft, endless hush. Breathe in deeply. Hold. And breathe out. You are in her world now. And she is in yours. A quiet meeting of souls across time. The forgotten queen is forgotten no more. The night has deepened over Jerusalem. The hum of the city fades. Lanterns flicker in the narrow streets, and a cool breeze drifts through arches where once banners of war were hung. Above, the stars are still, silent watchers of 1,000 years. They have seen kings rise and crumble. They have seen empires burn and rebuild. But they have also seen her, the queen who refused to be forgotten. Millicent. Her name is soft to say, like a prayer in an empty chapel. You can almost see her still, not as a monarch upon a throne, but as a woman standing alone in her garden, barefoot among the herbs and lilies she once planted herself. The air smells of stone and rosewater. Somewhere nearby, a nightingale sings, its voice trembling like candlelight. She stands quietly, looking toward the walls of her city, not proud, not sorrowful, but still, at peace with all that has passed. That is how her story truly ends. Not in war, not in defeat, but in quiet understanding. Take a breath with her. Inhale the scent of old earth and myrrh. Exhale the centuries of noise. The crackling hearth fades into silence. The tapestries on her palace walls no longer flutter. But her story, it moves gently still, like dust caught in a golden beam of morning light. Think of how far her name has traveled, from Latin scripts on torn parchments, to whispers in ancient convents, to scholars and dreamers rediscovering her voice, from forgotten graves to glowing screens, from silence to sound, from shadow to light. And now it rests here, in your breath, in your heartbeat. You have carried her story forward. You are part of what remembers her. Close your eyes. Hear the sound of the old city, the wind brushing across stone, the echo of sandals on ancient stairs, the soft murmur of prayer carried by the dawn. Imagine walking there, through arches of pale limestone, past walls where ivy creeps, down to a courtyard where a single olive tree stands. At its roots lies a weathered stone. No crown, no epitaph, only a mark. You kneel beside it, run your fingers over the cool surface, and you whisper, "You are remembered." The world is quiet now. The story has been told. But history is a living thing. It waits for those who listen, not to the loudness of battles, but to the softness of endurance. Melisandre's legacy was not carved in blood, but in patience, in love, in her refusal to vanish. And tonight she lives again, not in palaces or cathedrals, but in a quiet space inside you. So breathe. One last deep breath. Feel the centuries drift away. The weight of the world lightens. The mind softens. Only calm remains. Let her story settle like twilight on still water. Let it rest. Let it sleep. 'Cause now she is home. And so are you.